Observation 1 is the resolutional analysis. Sub 1A is the resolution. The United States federal government should adopt a policy that substantially reduces America's dependence on foreign petroleum. B is going to be the all-inclusive policy and benefits is the best criterion for this round, as well as most equal access to the bid and most predictable burdens and methods of reputation. So, the background. One is that the military is the largest consumer of energy in the United States, with the Air Force being the highest consumer within the Department of Defense. The second is that in the fiscal year 2013, the DoD consumed 847 trillion BT units of site and delivered the energy at a cost of $20.4 billion and produced about 70.3 million tons of carbon dioxide. So, the plan. In order to adopt a policy that substantially reduces America's dependence on foreign oil, the United States federal government, through an act of Congress signed by the President, will fund the transition of the United States military to, transition of the United States military to algae biofuels for all military operations. Solvency. The first is going to be that military innovation has had success in the past. You can look to the fact that they established the internet and that they've used GPS sufficiently to create advancements. The second is going to be that algae biofuel is easily harvested and can be produced in mass quantities without damaging the environment. It is extremely easy for us to do this. A little three here is that the biofuel doesn't emit carbon dioxide whatsoever, which means that there would be a complete reduction in carbon dioxide. Yeah.
What's the GPS argument for sure?
It's just a warrant for why military innovation has been successful in the past. Okay. Advantage 1 is the environment. The A is going to be the uniqueness. Is one in the last century, the atmospheric concentrations of key greenhouse gases such as nitrogen or methane have been increasing due to human activities. The little A is that this causes ocean acidification because when you see an increase in the carbon dioxide, it then goes into the ocean and it becomes a carbon sink where it gets trapped and creates environmental damage there. The little B here is that the emissions are a key factor in environmental degradation. The reason why the major reason why the temperature has been increasing and populations have become at risk is because of the fact that we've had this increase in temperature that has led to the ocean acidification that has destroyed several coral reefs. The B is coral reefs. The B is going to be the links. One is that the plan funds algae as a form of renewable resources to replace the oil and petroleum products that are being used by the military. The second argument here is that algae production. Algae produces more than oil ever can and more than petroleum products can. The little A here is that it yields up to 30 times more fuel per unit of land and it is easier to harvest and it's more efficient with its land use than products that use oil. The third argument here is that energy and capital looked at this and they said that energy production and cost can cover up to 90% with algae, which means that we have the ability to retool the military to use 90% algae biofuel instead of using the petroleum products that they're using now. C is going to be the impacts. One is environmental damage. A is that the average temperature has increased by 3.5 Celsius, or is going to increase by 3.5 Celsius by 2100. This is these increases in the past have led to harsher weather conditions. You can see megastorms that have created significant damage that are due to the increase in global warming. Additionally, the little A here is that you can see that red tides have been increasing, which is basically a poisonous thing that happens when the algae gets overpopulated. It creates an algae bloom that then kills off because it literally becomes red, it turns the ocean red and poisons the areas. This is uniquely key because it affects coral reef populations, which holds up to 90% of the biodiversity within the ocean. If you collapse the ocean ecosystem, then it basically leads to mass extinction because 90% of that population will then kill off island areas that need this to survive and eat these things, which are eat food basically. Which means that the only way to check this back is to stop the largest consumer of petroleum and be able to stop that. Going on to advantage. Well, 10 minutes. A is going to be the uniqueness. The first argument here is that the military is largely oil dependent and it's only been getting worse. The little A here is that the U.S. uses about $80 billion per oil daily, and this is more than 80 other countries combined. The little B here is that the IEA reports that over the next 50 years, we're going to be using even more and becoming only more dependent within the military. The little C is that the military strategy depends largely on foreign oil. You can look to the fact that when we had military conflicts back in the 70s and we had problems with oil trading with Iran, there were huge oil shocks and gas riots, and this created long lines that forced people to stay in these areas. Additionally, the next warrant here is that in World War II, oil played a key factor. You can look to the fact that a lead German official came out later on and said that they thought that they lost the war because they started to run out of oil. This was directly partly because back then the U.S. was the major oil producer, and they were giving about 6 billion of the tons of oil out of the 7 billion that they were consuming. Additionally, it was key to crippling Japan. You can see that when we cut off oil supply to Japan, they had zero ability to actually fight back, and they crippled their entire navy, which was a key win for the United States. Without this ability, we won't be able to check back conflicts. The second argument here is that there are tensions on oil right now. Little A is because of a recent boom. OPEC has lowered our relations have been hurt with OPEC, and they've been really pissed at the fact that we won't raise back up our prices and that we've just been plummeting their stocks. And the little B here is that in an event of conflict, they're not going to want to trade us because they have the ability to increase their prices and do what they've been trying to, which means that they will create more tension. The little B here is going to be the link. The one is that the plan decreases dependence on foreign oil, especially within the military, because there's absolutely no reason for us to go overseas when we have the oil to substitute the 10% that the algae biofuel won't be able to, which means that we can go completely independent from the foreign oil. The second argument here is that this allows us to check back conflicts. When we have the ability to sustain our military, then we have the ability to stop other conflicts that are having a status quo, so the impacts. One is that oil shocks are pretty bad. This kills the economy. You can look to the fact that when we have oil shocks, employers will lay off their workers, and new jobs aren't created, which creates a stagnant economy and increases poverty, and it creates a cyclical cycle. When people don't have the ability to get their jobs back, this creates the dichotomy of not being able to pay for basic needs such as food and shelter, which means that they have to basically choose the way that they die. The second argument here is that this creates the inability to check back war, which creates an unending conflict. When you can look to the fact that U.S. hedge has been able to check back conflicts in Israel and eventually got them to stop bombing Gaza, and additionally we have kept Saudi Arabia from shipping their nuclear weapon that they bought from Pakistan over their border. You can see that the U.S. ability to wield military power has stopped these conflicts, but absent this ability and with a crippled military, we're going to have no ability to check back these conflicts, and they will escalate in the status quo and lead to thousands of people dying. And conventional warfare is pretty problematic because it kills more people than nuclear warfare when it goes on for longer amounts of time.
Okay, cool. Or it'll be off, then,
Sorry, how many?
three.
Okay.
Yeah, no need for the background page, just 3 off, advantage 1, the environment, advantage 2, dependency.
Yeah, there should be.
Oh, yeah, it's not advantage to use it.
I was gonna steal it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, you need to this goes all one. Okay. Let me know when I get there, okay? Alright. Anybody not ready? First, the topicality, A is the interpretation. The affirmative must directly increase U.S. production of oil, gas, wind, or solar. Again, the affirmative must directly increase U.S. production of oil, gas, wind, or solar. Violation, you do algae biofuels, not oil, gas, wind, or solar. Again, you do algae biofuels, not oil, gas, wind, or solar. Stands for, so it was predictability. When they say the state of the unanimity only looks predictability of the term in by literally said the state of the unanimity. Thing from which we will be drawing all the topics. So I mentioned only those things, and basically only mentioned foreign oil depends in the context of oil, gas, wind, or solar. Guarantees that this is the only possible predictability. Or we say someone did this filters what the name premise of critical predictability, which means that the only way to have clash and better education in this debate, also the only way for the negative to engage in this debate, all of us will just live every time to the limits that we get down. Literal metal flex, they can pick one of those 4 fuels while the negative can still engage with you. I may be able to check the infinite permutations of 4 possibilities, like literally you could sanction a rod and say, yeah, we're decreasing the amount of oil and rod selling to us, thus we're decreasing dependence. Can we just limit or reasonable limit the topic? This is the most fair, and it creates the most fair division of ground, which the best possible way 3 is death education. We do not listen to the topic area of the term. This makes all of the research that we've done prior to the tournament absolutely void and useless, means that there's no ability to test our research via having a debate anymore, which means that there's no educational value for the round. Thus, the issue is the issue is the fairness to education, but it's not for an issue. We have to have rules of the game where we can play it, also by competing interpretations, by standards, offense, and defense for given interpretation. Does that Saudi Arabia need this? With the ascension of King Salman to the throne, the U.S. is currently able to restore relations with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. For example, Salman is pro-United States, someone who was educated within the United States, analyst of psychology, also did most of his advanced training in the United States, little babies they did before. The previous kings that held talks to Loma in the United States regarding fighting terrorism and other security issues. Someone sees that within the director of the Gulf and Energy Policy program for the Washington Institute, saying that Salman is Mr. Security and requires and is very thought of very highly within the United States. The second was that oil reports are critical for U.S.-Saudi relations. Someone named the historical base of the United States date back to the American prospectors fighting oil in Saudi Arabia. That's how we got Aramco, which is the American Saudi oil company. We still fund that company's ability to extract oil from them because of our historic ties. So these, according to a study by the Congressional Research Service on January 23rd, and the high value U.S. Saudi trade is directly implicated by United States oil imports from Saudi trade, which means that all of our trade is predicated on the fact that we are importing oil from Saudi Arabia. That's the links. One play address the decreased dependence on foreign oil. You're making arguments for us. You're telling that we are going to be decreasing the amount of oil that we're importing from Saudi Arabia. So this will collapse relations for a couple reasons. First, the economic relations on the backbone of all the relations. We are decreasing our military aid to Saudi Arabia. We are making states that are pro-Iran. The only thing we have left at this point is our economic ties to Saudi Arabia, because the economic ties supposed to be first to be the most important thing to the planet. It's I think besides the shit that we are literally banning Saudi Arabia. It's the last thing. Basically saying this is the last straw. We are getting out of any and all ties to Saudi Arabia. And the third is that you were necessarily going to, if there's any spillover arguments being true, it's going to lead to a new oil regime where the United States oil imported off the King of Saudi Arabia. That's the impacts, or rather interlinks. First, Saudi Arabia will necessarily respond to the United States decreasing its imported by backstopping the market basis. That means they will just flood the entirety of the market with a crap ton of really cheap oil. This will do a couple things. First, it will have some turn cases. It makes this incredibly, comparably much more expensive to invest in algal biofuels, which means that all of the research is much more expensive and people won't want to do anymore. The next thing is this also means that there will be that everyone will also have comparable military advantage against the United States, turning all of your war arguments, because they'll just be able to use oil and it'll be even cheaper than algal biofuels. Not the impact to the first is that in order to do backslide moves, all of your oil stocks must have to be first and faster, right? In order they are flooding the entirety of the market in countries that are on the brink, like Russia, whose the value of the ruble has literally fallen part and parcel with the value of the global oil prices. Guarantees that there's only risk of Russia and other country states will necessarily collapse into a larger global economic collapse. But you tell us the app leads to trade wars that will necessarily massive amounts of confidence. Also, that's in terms of case giving the analysis as well. Anything else? Cool. 3 Iran. Yes. Nuclear talks with Iran succeed in the status quo. The first time the talks will necessarily result in nuclear-free Iran. The status quo something is on January 18th. The chief Chinese negotiators say the talks are pragmatic and the consensus on multiple issues is rising. Someone being according to the EU foreign minister. For the first time, talks have a real chance to succeed. Someone sees according to the United States literally offered the first possible compromise for Iran to retain some of its capacities with a massive amount of moderating from international sources. Guarantees that the one big sticking issue, i.e. the ability for Iran to retain anything at all as far as eventual capabilities, is going to be resolved. The status quo only risks of you messing that up. The two is that we see the cornerstone of the debate for Iran's economic pressure on Iran. So is that any threat of sanctions is literally game over. The reason why there's a concern about the bill in Congress to sanction Iran is because the Ayatollah Khamenei said the sanctions would be absolutely unacceptable. More of the United States repeat for sanctions is one critical reason why Iran's coming to the table. Yeah.
Iran literally just offered a bunch of deals on oil in the event that talks succeed, right?
In the event of the talks succeed, Iran has offered a bunch of deals on oil guarantees that they are using oil as a bargaining chip in the status quo to get the United States to come to their side. Also, since Iran exported 200 to 400,000 tons of oil to the United States and other Western powers in the last year, guarantees that they are exporting massive amount of oil, of course, to their economy. With the links from more the United States decreases its spend support on all this collapses Iran talks. The first time in order you collapse on the United States is sanctioning and all but name guarantees that you're going to necessarily to Iran pulling out of the talk that they are perceiving that the United States is going to keep economically punishing them even without sanctions. The two argument is that you were going to be a perceptual shift. The entirety of the West was as anti-Iran to the United States and all of it's going to be turning toward biofuels and other fuels. Anything else on links?
Great.
Cool. Interlinks. In order Iran talks about this is really striking about it. Netanyahu said that our nuclear Iran is a red line he will not allow to pass. So the only thing keeping it from striking right now is the United States compromise and saying that we will necessarily be able to resolve things with talks and status quo guarantees that there's only risk that you will lead to having some reason to strike against Iran. So that this happens only where Iran will mind the straight from his turning case and guarantee that there's a massive increase in the oil prices across the board. But there's also very high risk that in order the strike happens, there will be a conventional war and then necessarily go nuclear between the United States and Israel on one side and Russia and Iran on the other. Next, advantage one. Alright. You say we emitted 70.3 million tons of CO2 last year. Think about how many billions of barrels that is. You will not be able to get algal biofuels in any moderately reasonable time frame. The advantage makes literally no sense. Next, drone impact scenario tells us that algae blooms necessarily kill a shit ton of other things. So turn you're also going to increase cultivation of algae. This is going to cause all of your impacts to occur faster. Next, we already passed the break. The IPCC to act by 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the air. We already bypassed the characters that there's no possibility to come back with global warming. Also, the impact of the time frame of your impact is only 2100 guarantees that there's every other impact that's been will be evaluated first. And no matter what, because we're not going to solve warming war. I gotta get security. We're not going to solve warming guarantees that every other impact is made. What has to come first?
They don't make a spillover argument.
Yes. Okay. Dependency. The first time the Navy said that they're already going to go green by 2017. They're already adopting policies. They've already tested a full fleet that is all powered exclusively off of biofuels. There's no risk of your impacts current because the Navy will still be able to check back against this section. The domestic shale oil will be able to check back against this from massive amount of domestic oil boom. All of your arguments as to why oil prices are currently oil tensions are high right now is because the United States is exporting a shit ton more domestic crude oil right now. There's only risk that the shale prices will be able to check back any risk of your impact. The next argument that I want is that OPEC embargo. There's no your impacts empirically denied because the OPEC embargo did not cause any collapse of the nation's economy nor any cause the sort of cyclical harm that you're talking about. Only a risk that they're will bounce back and will be totally fine. Also say that in where all of our oil is cut off. There's only a risk we would reroute oil from civilian sources to military sources. The war for this is World War II, right? The United States literally weaponized massive numbers of different factories where things that were making hoses were now making grenade bells. Guarantees that we'll just reroute all of their civilian resources and technology to be able to sustain our military and order a massive conflict. Anything else? Cool. Also, no isolation of what war we'd get into or when this war would happen means to evaluate the probability of this man just incredibly dubious as having a massive time frame.
It'll be the same order.
Okay.
So T, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Advanced.
Advantage too.
Yep. Everybody good? Cool.
First argument is we meet that we are a direct increase in gas. The biofuel is a form of gas in case we are in a direct increase. Second, counter-interpretation that the affirmative must increase, adopt a policy that decreases our dependence on foreign petroleum. We say that we meet this interpretation because we are a decrease. You look to our entirety of advantage, it says we are a decrease in the dependency. The resolution doesn't call for these specific areas, but rather just a decrease in dependency. It means that any affirmative that decreases this is necessary is topical. Additionally, the next argument is that your interpretation is very bad because wind and solar aren't necessarily designed to decrease our petroleum, but rather decrease our dependence on coal. It's an indication to why your interpretation is over-limiting. But additionally, the next argument is counter-standards that first that our interpretation is better for the affirmative, better for the balance of ground. That we allow for a better number of affirmatives that are able to check back in the endless number of negative arguments that allows enough affirmative flexibility to be able to check back against this. Additionally, seconds that our interpretation is the most grounded in the literature. You can look to our specifically that not only is the Navy and the military have been calling for this specific policy, it makes it not only highly predictable, but additionally that this checks back against any of your argumentation. Additionally, on your standards, you say this is predictability. You say predictability. There's a difference between what is predictable and what's predicted. Just because you didn't predict our affirmative does not mean that's bad. That is a highly predictable affirmative that's been called for in the status quo. Additionally, you say limits. We say you are over-limiting the resolution to the point which we are only able to support four different kinds of four different fields, two of which are already bad and are already bad, like oil and gas. Is an indication of why those arguments aren't key. But additionally, you say this provides death of education. We say that we are providing education on this specific issue, and that these four specific fields are not key. We say that your interpretation already makes it so you have to prep four different affirmatives. An indication of why this is not, and why there's no loss of education. Additionally, competing interpretation is a bad frame for debate because it means that at least from an arbitrary interpretation that allows for to be able to write multiple contradictory top calculations that we would never be able to meet, and the reason you should prefer reasonability because it allows for to be able to have better discussion on the substantive issues so that they may be able to check back and provide better education and competitive equity. Saudi Arabia. First argument is that this is terminally not unique. That U.S.-Saudi Arabian relations are already very, very high. In terms of military cooperation, there will always be the issue that will check. You can look to only the PMC will tell you that the United States and Saudi Arabia have been checking on non-proliferation issues. Look to the specific one that says the United States has checked back in Saudi Arabia, transferring the nuclear weapon that they purchased from Pakistan as an indication why the United States will always have a better relationship. Additionally, seconds that we are cooperating over ISIS. ISIS is the main existential threat against Saudi Arabia and the status quo. They have isolated not only is an issue that's on their border, but additionally that ISIS is directly opposed to the Saudi Arabian government's indication of why this is always going to be this assuming issue. Additionally, the next argument is going to be that the second is the no link that other issues are able to check and link to Iran. As an example, that Saudi Arabia wants the United States to be able to check back against Iran as an indication of why these issues will always be able to assume. Additionally, the third argument is the turn that we increase the overall Saudi Arabian relation by decreasing our reliance on other nations for our oil dependency. You can look to the fact that Saudi Arabia would prefer to have a strong United States military. This will check back into threats as an indication of why Saudi Arabia will prefer this. Additionally, the next argument is that the oil is not the issue. You can look at the fact that because the decrease in oil prices recently has already made oil a non-issue in terms of Saudi Arabia. They're already experiencing a several $100 million shortfall in terms of their revenue. It's the first time since 2005 an indication of why oil is probably already an issue that's going to happen in the status quo. But additionally, it looks to the fact the turtlenecks are entirely do not make sense. You can look at the fact that OPEC wants higher prices in order to be able to check back into revenue. All of your argumentation about flooding the market with cheap oil just doesn't make sense in terms of the policy, in terms of the policies that they flood the market with cheap oil. They've destroyed the own government, their own source of government revenue. Is an indication of why OPEC wants to increase prices. You can look at this warrants coming out of the PMC that check back this analysis. Additionally, you say this turns case because it's more expensive fund analogy. This doesn't make sense. Oil shocks and oil dependence are only going to make it so that we will inevitably have to transfer. Our argument is that we should be having transfer now, not only when prices are low to the point which we are able to check back in state transition policies. But additionally, that the fact that not only are we going to run out of oil inevitably, this is an indication of why the affirmative now is key. Additionally, there's probably no internal. There's also no link to this because of the fact that we still have civilian.
We still have the civilian oils and the military oils will be.
Gotcha. Both, and you can look at the fact that we will still have imports from civilian populations. An indication of why we will still be importing as an indication of why this is not going to collapse the relationship.
Yeah. If the civilian, if we can't use civilian spillover because oil relations don't just affect the military; they affect the civilian population. So there's no spillover.
And oil relations affect both the military and the civilian as an indication of why there would be a spillover. It means it was resolved back in the dissent on Iran. First argument is not unique to the relation that the talks are going to inevitably collapse for 8 years. You can look to the fact that collapse and that talks have inevitably collapsed in the past. You can look to the fact that Iran has both agreed to the deals in the past, has agreed to prevent uranium, and has agreed to deals, and he's always followed through. As an indication of why there's no check on the talks now. Additionally, will be so you can look to the Iran sanctions bill that's currently going through Congress now. That's going to collapse relations. That the congressional Republicans want to implement a policy that's going to increase these sanctions on Iran. As an indication that not only is Iran perceiving this negatively, it means that the talks are going to inevitably collapse. But additionally, that congressional Republicans want to take a hardline stance. It's an indication of why the Obama administration is never going to be able to check this. Additionally, the next argument is the turn that we are able to increase our ability to counterbalance against Iran. That one of the main sources that prevents us from being able to check back against these threats as per our advantage too is the ability for Iran to be able to cut off oil supplies. An indication of why when we get off oil, we're very able to have negotiation power. Additionally, the next argument is that the next argument is that the risk of an Israel first strike is very low. Not only has the United States always been able to check back against Israel in the past because we provide them $300 billion a year in terms of military aid, but additionally that Israel would need the United States in terms of refueling within the region in order to be able to not only complete the mission. An indication of why an Israel first strike would never occur. Additionally, the next argument is going to be that there's just no link to this, that this is not going to be perceived negatively as a sanction. You list the fact that this, not only is this an indirect policy, that Iran's not going to be perceived negatively. Additionally, the transition over time is going to be able to check back against any perception issue. Means this argumentation doesn't matter. Additionally, they say that they're going to mine the Strait of Hormuz. Not only has Iran not have the capability to mine the Strait of Hormuz, because in fact not only do they not have the mines that are necessary. Additionally, the United States has the mining technology in terms of being able to provide for things like dolphins that we have trained in order to be able to remove these mines. As an indication of why the Strait of Hormuz would never happen.
The Aff is the only way to check back the impacts of this.
Additionally, the affirmative is the only way to check back against the impacts of the dissent, because we get off the oil that allows for Iran to be able to take the leveraging point to implement these policies in the first place. Means the affirmative checks on advantage one. They say that we're not able to transition because we don't have enough algae into the massive algae blooms in Chesapeake Bay as a place where we can be able to remove this. But additionally, you can look to the fact that we have been able to cultivate within large tanks within indoor facilities, an indication of why not only we'll be able to provide enough, but additionally, this tracks back into your second argument that says we'd be cultivating it in bodies of water that would kill other things. We were able to do this indoors in large tanks as an indication of why we were able to solve this. But additionally, you said we're past the point of no return. Not only has the ICC said that there's 95% chance that 95% certainty that the warming is anthropocentric. Additionally, that we need to be able to, and we need to start decreasing CO2 in the next 3 years as an indication of why the plan now is key. But additionally, you say the time frame is 2100. However, you can see the harsh impacts of worse weather now is an indication of why the affirmative taking back now is key. On to bench 2. They say that the Navy is going green by 2017. This is not true. You can look at the fact there's no funding for these policies, and that the plans the only way that's going to create a transition quick enough.
Okay. The order is T. Let's see. Let's do T, Iran, KSA, global warming, and damage jail. So T. They said 2, they said 1, global warming, which is advantage 1, advantage 2. Has everyone got that?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Cool. I'm ready to go? Yeah. Awesome. On topicality, you can send there we meet. We're not going for this position. There's no offense in this sheet of paper. Around. Drop into the impact level. You can extend that Iran does not have the capability to mine this rate of almost. There's no risk of an impact. You can also extend the argument that Israel will simply not will never first strike because they simply don't have the resources at their disposal. There's no impact to this position. You want anything else?
No.
Cool. KSA. You say that relations are terminally high, but your first warrant is that we stop them from transferring weapons into Pakistan, which they probably didn't do in the first place. But additionally, that's only a reason why relations are low in terms of military cooperation and why economic ties via oil trade is literally the only thing keeping us together. You have simply conceded the second unique that says that oil is the linchpin of our relations because we are not cooperating with them militarily. You conceded Zach's warrant that says that we have been decreasing military aid to Saudi Arabia steadily for the past 5 years, which indicates that they are not relying on our military cooperation. But you also conceded that oil is specifically critical, even if there are other things going on with our relations. You conceded that oil is especially necessary and is sufficient to collapse relations regardless of what else is going on because it is necessarily historic. And you've also conceded that you point 2 subpoint C that says the high value of our oil trade is literally all the high value of trade is all predicated off of our oil dues, which indicates that oil is necessarily key. You say that ISIS means that we are cooperating now, but this argument goes our direction. This is because you've conceded our perception link. This means that Saudi Arabia would perceive this transition as being dramatic, but also being ill-timed because we're currently combating ISIS. They would perceive this as a massive distraction for the military against them. It would be costly and probably not as effective and would slow down the fight against ISIS, which means that even if you buy that there's any risk of military cooperation, that would necessarily be collapsing the world oil collapse because they think we'd be doing a bad job. Next. You say no link, other issues would be able to check back. I've answered that like 10 times. Next, you say term that you necessarily increase relations by decreasing reliance on other nations that are not the KSA. I think that's the argument, but you conceded that this would necessarily not be the case. We get very little of our oil from Saudi Arabia. It's only 13%. We get more than twice that from Canada, 28%, which means that in a world where we were making this transition, we would probably rely less on Saudi Arabia in the first place, which means that they would only be additionally angered. But also, you conceded that the amount that you would decrease oil dependence is enough to collapse trade. It's not about are we buying any oil at all from Saudi Arabia. It's about how much are we buying. You've conceded that you would dramatically decrease the amount of oil that you buy from Saudi Arabia, which means that they would freak out. Next, Also, you can extend the first thing that says that because we are taking a pro-Iran stance and we are decreasing their military aid, oil is literally the only thing left. That's fine. And the perceptual link. Next. You say that oil has been an issue since 2005, but you don't have a warrant for this position. You consider that you're still buying enough oil from Saudi Arabia to keep their economy afloat and keep them happy in a world where we significantly decrease all of our purchases, especially when it's for the military. The perceptual shift combined with the economic devastation for Saudi Arabia would be sufficient to trip the link. You simply can't get out of that by saying that we've been increasing oil since 2005. That is not specifically predicated. That is not specifically related to our relations with Saudi Arabia. Next, you say that Saudi Arabia would never flood the market because they want to increase prices. That is simply not true. The Saudi Arabia doesn't flood the market permanently. That's not the way it works. They flood the market temporarily in order to crowd out other kinds of technology. You have necessarily conceded that they would do this in the short term in order to make up the money that they lose in the long run. This is especially true given that Saudi Arabia perceives that they have enough reserves in their budget right now to handle the shocks. That's why they haven't increased the prices so far with OPEC and decreased their production so far. OPEC indicates that they would be willing to flood the market in order to decrease prices and then they would jack them back up. That's the way flooding the market works. That means that you turn case because you can see that would necessarily happen. That's fine. Next, you see the oil shock necessarily never, which you don't have a warrant for this position, but additionally, we see that the oil shock in this instance would be especially devastating. Also, we're not going for oil shocks, we're going for flooding the market. That means that you, but we see that oil shocks necessarily happen faster in a world where other economies collapse, which means that transferring now is especially bad, which is fine. Next. You see that we will run out of oil eventually. That is finally not true. Literally every single time that has been predicted, people find oil reserves a few years later, and we are still finding them every single day in the United States. That is not true. Next, you said we still have imports for civilian purposes. That means you cannot solve for global warming, but additionally, we said that the military perceptual shift is enough for Saudi Arabia to trip the dissat, but it also means that you can't solve for global warming, and we still get our impacts, and you don't get to solve global warming. The environment. You said that you can cultivate the algae in words, but you don't make a single argument said that there are any algae cultivating facilities in the status quo, which means that the DoD would have to design them, place them, and get in all the water and bring in all the algae and hire a bunch of people to grow it, and which require a shit ton of focus and a bunch of money, which means that they would never be able to do. But additionally, you would still have to harvest the initial algae from the oceans, which means you have to go way undersea and to harvest it, which would still hurt the fish, which you would still use a lot of fuel, which you would still necessarily not be able to solve for global warming, but. You said that the plan now is key, but you can see that we are already past the brink. You simply cannot solve for global warming. By 2017, in a world where you just let the United States military, one military in the entire world, switch 90% of its fossil fuels to a different kind of fuel. You don't make a spillover link. You don't say that you solve for civilian energy consumption. You don't say that you solve for any other nation. You don't say that you solve for any other kind of military. China is the world's largest polluter in the world, which indicates that there's no propensity for you to solve. You need those arguments in order to win the state. But the next argument is that you can't solve for industrial pollution. Industrial pollution accounts for more than 50% of U.S. greenhouse emissions and gases, and even more in Chinese, which means that you can't solve for businesses. You solve them for the military is simply not sufficient. You have to solve for the industrial sector, but also for civilian purposes. That's fine. You are way past the time frame. You can't solve for this. That's enough. Yeah. I might go back to that one, but advantage 2. You said that the military doesn't have any funding in the status quo. LOL, the military has a ton of funding, and they've already announced a policy to eventually agreement it much slower, and additionally it's isolated to the Navy, which indicates that which indicates that the status quo is able to solve eventually. But the MG doesn't make a single argument that says that should put the link on the dispatch. So don't let them do that in the PMR. Next you say that oil is
Domestic shield checks.
Oh yeah. The next one is the domestic shield necessarily checks you not into this argument, which indicates that you simply can't solve for this disadvantage. But the next you say on the uniqueness level. You said that the IACs will be becoming increasingly more dependent, but that is actually the opposite of the truth. The IACs says that we decreased our oil dependency every single year since 2005. Literally for the past 10 years, we've been decreasing it. But additionally, you said that the military, military relies on oil. That means, let's see. You said that the military relies on oil, but you've not made a specific argument why oil is not enough to check back for all the conflicts that you talk about in a world where you've not made a single argument that says that algae blooms are somehow sufficient or necessary or uniquely key. There's literally no reason why oil is not sufficient to solve, which means that the status quo is able to solve the entirety of this advantage. There's only a risk that all of the conflicts that we isolate in the diss have to necessarily be triggered in a world of the plan, but you would not be able to address them because the entire DoD would be in the middle of transferring all of their energy technology, which means that these conflicts would explode, but there would be no ability to check them back, at least in the status quo. If these conflicts ever happen, the United States would be able to check them back because we are currently using oil. You would make that impossible. You would just say that you're doing the transition so that you would still be able to use the oil to check back, but you've already conceded the fact that it would take a massive amount of DoD energy resources and focus means that you would simply not be able to do it, but also the perceptual shift would undermine all of our coalition in the fight against ISIS, so you would still necessarily collapse that coalition and trigger a bunch of flashpoint conflicts. Next. Let's see. Drop down to the impact level. You can sense argument that this is the oil shocks killing the economy, or that this is empirically denied that this would kill the economy, but additionally you could see that we could just, let's see. But additionally, you say you would never be able to solve back the conflict just by using algae blooms. There's simply no propensity to do that. No, we did not stop Israel from bombing Gaza. I don't think we can do that. In the future, we provide that the military is somehow able to check back the conflict. It doesn't matter because there's no reason why oil is not able to do that, and why algae is key. That doesn't make any sense. Next, you can go back to the environmental advantage one. I'm just going to add some stuff. The next one is you're never able to solve because the EIA predicts that the developing nations will account for more than half carbon emissions by 2020, and they can't decrease their emissions because it's key to their economy, but you're never able to solve back to that. You don't make a spillover. Sorry. Leave that.
It'll be Disad, advantage 2, advantage 1. Okay, is anybody not ready? Awesome. There is no risk you do anything with the app. If we win even a tiny shred of offense on the disad or on the case, you will be voting negative in this debate. Go to the disad copper now. You conceded multiple arguments that tell you that the only thing keeping U.S. and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia together at all is the fact that we are still buying something at all from them, right? The argument is that oil underpins every other component of trade from Saudi Arabia. That means that even if there has been some level of decrease, we have not totally abandoned them wholesale. We say that the plan is a move that we will be doing so completely wholesale. This is true because every other arena of relations we have fallen through on them. Diplomatically, we've begun to support Iran via going to them on talks. We are not with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on taking a strong stance against Iran. Moreover, we've also cut military aid to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, guarantees that the only other things that would save our relations with them are simply non-existent in the status quo. It's just a question of economic ties, and you can see that this will necessarily collapse the world plan. Now I want to extend Margaret's argument about ISIS. This is money. We tell you that they will only perceive an imminent transition as the U.S. DoD not knowing what the hell it's doing vis-a-vis ISIS, right? There's only a risk that this is a link magnifier that tells you that when the DoD just decides it's going to change the source of all of its fuel while it's already fighting what the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia perceives to be one of the most dangerous terrorist organizations on the planet, it guarantees that Saudi Arabia is only going to freak out. There's only a risk of these impacts. Now, onto the link arguments. You will debate, you will assess the link via the link turn. You will conclude in favor of the link because their link turn is literally the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia wants the United States to have a strong military. That means you have to solve the advantage that you didn't get to in the MG in order to be able to get access to the link turn, right? Moreover, you can see an analysis that says that the link will always come first because it is a question of imminent pullout, right? That's the ICE arguments Margaret's giving you. Also, it's a question of whether or not the United States is perceived as having any sort of reason to, rather, it's a question of whether or not the bedrock of all of our trade is being pulled out in the first place. Even if our military is strong, we're not supporting Kingdom of Saudi Arabia militarily in the slightest right now. It means the military is not something that they care about anymore, which means that you can go down to the impact level. You have cold conceded that in a world where Saudi Arabia freaks out, the thing that they will do is backstop. They will flood the market. You say OPEC wants high prices, but Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is the only country with a massive amount of resources. That means that even if we don't get to something huge like economic collapse, we're still getting to prices across the board getting so low that not only will your app necessarily not happen, you've also conceded that we will see petrostates such as Russia necessarily collapse. And whenever this occurs, you will see a massive risk of these countries going to war with one another. Also, only a chance there will be conflict across the board. Yeah?
This impact analysis of the petrostates collapsing was absent from the MO.
It's in the LOC, it was conceded in the MG, and Margaret sends the impact.
The only impact that I have extended is that it turns case, because they call market.
Alright, well, I'm sure it's under consideration, so alright. Even if you don't give us the specifics of a war with Russia, you will give us the fact that in the war where oil is dirt cheap, certainly things are going to be worse for a whole lot of people across the entirety of the planet. Margaret does extend that impact for you. There's only a risk of a lot of people not being able to support their economies any longer while the oil price of oil is this low. That means that there's a massive risk of there being independent impact here. Next. The Aff proper. The end one. You need to win that we will have enough algal biofuels being used by the military to be able to resolve all of global warming by 2017. That is the framework you set up for yourselves in the MG. That is simply not possible. You do not have the facilities to make that happen right now. You do not have the ability to get modeled by other countries such as China or other developing countries, and you do not have any ability to check back for industry or civilian pollution, which means that there's no risk you solve this advantage. It will not matter in this debate. Also, the time frame is simply too far away. Only risk you will vote for the more probable impacts of a low price of oil making a lot of people suffer. Now onto the defensive advantage. Getting here with 6 seconds left in the MG is not sufficient. We tell you that there's only a risk that there is a slow transition right now that solves all of your impacts, and only a risk that the fast transition now disrupts relations with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Next, you have conceded arguments that there is no reason why algae is critical, or why this means you're going to be able to suddenly address conflict. You also extend the analysis that this will necessarily... Yep, no, that's all we need there. Look. You've conceded multiple levels of analysis that there is only a risk the United States will be able to check back against this. There's also independent arguments such as the fact that the United States has domestic shale oil, which we'll be able to use to be able to check back against this, which means that a domestic source of oil, which means that we will be able to fund our military no matter what. It's only a question of whether or not you check the impacts of this then.
Alright. Quick overview. And then we're going to go on to the Saudi. Actually, we're going to go on to advantage 2 and then the Saudi disad, and then advantage one.
Sorry, one more time?
Okay, so overview advantage 2, the disadvantage on Saudi, and then advantage 1. Three problems that is going to be the reason why you signed the ballot for Nevada. The first is that the entire premise of the app is that U.S. dependence on oil is what is going to collapse hedge, which is what is going to make it hard for us to check back these conflicts and going to make those conflicts happen. They are not answering this back when we say that the U.S. has the ability to check them now, but military collapse is not going to be able to do that. The second one here is that we are just winning the warrants, that oil is key to winning a war. You can extend across the warrants that in World War II, Japan and Germany literally came out and said that losing access to oil is the key thing that hurt them back. Additionally, the third argument here is going to be the tiebreaker. They never answer back our Israel scenario. They try to say that their impact of Saudi turns case because Saudi is one warrant, but they never answer back that U.S. is key to checking Israel, and without the ability to check them and stop strikes in the future, they will continue to be aggressive towards the Palestinian people and kill thousands of people. Going on to advantage 2. The first thing that we need to, the first big point here is that they're assuming that we are fastly transitioning. This has not come out until the MO saying that this fast and instant transition is going to create the collapse that they are talking about. We by no means say that tomorrow we're going to be using 90% algae biofuel. That is nowhere in the PMC, and that is a drastic assumption. By no means would the military ever make such a fast switch that we would collapse the entire military strength. This would never happen. The plan functions via normal means, which means that we have the ability, or which means that it will transition at a pace that doesn't collapse it. Additionally, they say that there's tons of funding, but we would say that there's not tons of funding for biofuel. This is the warrant coming out. The DoD is funding largely oil to the military, which is the problem here. And this actually answers back their argument saying that we need tons of money because the money going to oil will then be transferred to using for the algae biofuel. This means that there is absolutely no risk of their collapse of the military. There's no reason why this won't be able to happen. Additionally, you can extend across our solvency point saying that the military has been key to innovation and that the military has been able to do this successfully in the past and only increase their strength. You can extend across the fact that several different key transitions, such as the internet, were able to make us a world powerhouse. So transitioning has been empirically proven to make the U.S. military more powerful, not the opposite. They don't answer back these warrants, so you should prefer historical precedent. When the U.S. military has innovated in the past, it has only led to them becoming stronger. Additionally, they try to say that we don't make the argument why oil is key and why algae is key and why oil isn't. But once again, you can extend across the conceded warrants that when we're dependent on oil, it makes us dependent on foreign nations. Using biofuel means that we're only dependent on ourselves because it's a 90% dependency, or it would be a 90% free from dependency on other foreign powers, which means that we're not worried about them cutting our ties. Additionally, the other key argument here is that you can extend across that OPEC is pissed off at us and that they would make these conflicts even worse and they wouldn't be cooperating with the United States when they feel like we've destroyed their oil supply. They're only going to be flooding the market with high oil prices but not wanting to trade with the U.S. They concede that OPEC would pull out of trades with the U.S. if we did try to go back, which means that we would have a problem with oil and not be able to check back the conflicts, collapsing the military. They don't answer this back. You prefer this advantage on the fact that we have warrants coming out of the PMC and extended in the MG saying that we need oil in wartime crises. Additionally, you can extend across that tensions are extremely high right now in the status quo, which means that we are getting access to the fact that U.S. hedge is absolutely key, and that foreign dependence on oil is the only thing that could shake this. They're not answering this back. They don't have any turns here whatsoever, which means that a risk of conflict not being able to be checked back by the app is always going to be outweighing. You can look to the fact that sheer magnitude of conventional war killing thousands of people is going to stop this. Additionally, this is a prior question to their disadvantage on Saudi Arabia, and they never interact with the Israel impact, saying that we need to stop Israel's ability to first strike. Going on to the DA of Saudi Arabia. First off, look to the fact that this is only a turns case, but it doesn't even turn case, it just turns one tiny portion of our impact from advantage 2, which means that we can always outweigh here. Additionally, they say that Saudi Arabia is going to perceive this as traumatic, but we would say say that that the relations are already in a weird spot right now, which means that the only way that Saudi Arabia would pull back on us is if they don't feel secure. You can look to their own analysis saying that Saudi Arabia relies on us for military dependence. This is exactly key, because if we don't have the ability to subsidize their military, if we don't have the ability to back them up in conflict, they are only going to be feel weaker in the face of conflict, which means that they will freak out more, meaning that your entire disadvantage is inevitable when you just say that there's going to be conflict, but you don't answer back the uniqueness scenario saying that there's conflict now in the status quo that only US hegemony can check. Meaning that you don't have any unique offense here whatsoever. Additionally, you don't impact out anything. You make all of these time frame, but you don't create any better time frame arguments here, which means that there are no impacts for you to weigh out on time frame, meaning that advantage 2 can outweigh the entirety of their offense.
To a decision for the opposition for Whitman. Real quickly, I think if you're going for advantage 2 in the PLR, you're conceding 2 arguments. 1, you have to solve by 2017. You don't have a spillover argument anywhere in advantage 2. Probably means you don't solve the Aff. In that context, it means that voting for advantage 2 doesn't have much solvency in my opinion, even if there is marginal solvency. And I think you're also conceding this devastating argument that historically, even if your impact is true, wouldn't collapse the economy whatsoever. I then weigh that against the Saudi Arabia dissent. I think that Saudi Arabia dissent turns case because even at best there's an influx in oil prices, probably destabilizes a whole bunch of economies. But I think that the devastating one that makes me prove the link is that this argumentation about ISIS that goes completely undropped. It's a timing question. It's not necessarily what we're doing. Since we're allied against ISIS, any move in our military is necessarily bad. I think this is a pretty good debate. I think you just let them rickroll you a little bit too much on our relations with Saudi Arabia being contingent on fucking oil. I don't understand this. Like, they've been top 5 in military spending for the longest, so even if we're decreasing on them, we're decreasing on everybody. There's not, or even if we increase on a certain country, there's not a link differential that says that they're pissed off about that, or anything of that matter. And I think you need to harp on the better. Y'all, there is no researched alternative to jet fuel. There's no researched alternative to jet fuel. So if you're going for hedge, you will collapse hedge with biofuel, clean. There is no alternatives to that, to jet fuel. Probably means that our military is shot and dead in water. And then you can make a bunch of arguments about aerial attack being key to the fucking entire military. So.
I presume that the status quo is acceptable. I thought your case arguments were pretty good in this debate. I think the PMR should have gone for advantage 1 and not advantage 2. I think that a lot of your defense against the disadvantage is good. You also make an argument in the block, I think you sort of referenced this argument, about how the U.S. has steadily been decreasing its dependence on foreign oil, so if that's true, it probably would have triggered the link to the disadvantage already. That's a new argument in the MO, at least I think it was a new argument in the MO, so I think that's pretty good defense against the disadvantage as well. But I don't think that there's any, I mean, you don't even go to advantage 1. Margaret, the argument I think you should have extended is the argument about how they even talk about how like the red algae tides and stuff like that are bad. I don't really understand the turn argument really that you're going for on advantage 1, but you do talk about how it might disrupt biodiversity, so I think that you need to answer that in PMR. The way I understand algae is that it sits on top of the water. So I don't understand why we'd have to go deep to get to it, yeah, so I don't think there's any risk of advantage 1. In advantage 2, I think that you need to answer back these arguments about how we have domestic shale oil and crude oil, and also just perceptually going for this advantage when you get to it with so little time, and the MG is just puts you behind in anything. So I think that I think the negative wins of the Navy is going green by 2017. I think that you should have. I don't think that they're going green based on biofuels or biodiesel or what the algae biofuels, but going green in some way. They at least talk about the carriers and things like that that could be green by that time period. Perhaps not the planes. And then also the arguments about how we would just be able to reroute oil from the civilian to the military. So I just don't think there's any risk of the Aff solving.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
What's y'all the team?